Good evening to the Board of Trustees, the Superintendent, to members of the public who are with us here in person and virtually. I am here to present, or to rather provide, the state of the zone for 2024. So we will jump right in. Certainly, something that I have personally encountered during my time here is around mindsets, and that, this is the way we've always done things. And so we need to keep doing it that way. And we've made a lot of progress with addressing some of those mindsets, but there's certainly still work to continue. So as a starting point, I want to start off by recapping a little bit of where we ended the last school year. So I believe last year, when we made this presentation, it was before the end of the school year. And so we just wanted to kind of close out that school year before talking about all the things that we have been doing this year. So last year, towards the end of the presentation, I shared that we were looking towards making 9 investments for the 23-24 school year. And we talked about preparing for the zone improvement plan, including things like empowering students, teacher wellness program alignment, and revamping our data practices. So I do want to take the opportunity to recognize all of our amazing students, faculty, and staff. This was the average growth for our iLearn results last year. Certainly, we do have some ways to go in terms of the percentage of students that are proficient, but as we always know, there is both mastery and there is growth. And so while we do have work to do in terms of students who are demonstrating mastery, what we did see was some success in terms of growth. And so the average growth of the zone in ELA and math was 3.6 percentage points and 3.3 percentage points respectively. And when we look at that in comparison to the corporation, several surrounding corporations, the diocese, the charter schools, et cetera, we're proud to say that our average growth last year on iLearn surpassed these other school systems. Going a little bit deeper into that data, we're also pleased to share that 100% of all zone elementary schools demonstrated positive growth in both ELA and math, which was not necessarily the case all around. And 100% of, well, we only have one middle school demonstrated growth in both ELA and math. And we have here the net increase so that you can see the growth from 21-22 to 22-23 in both ELA and math. Whenever I look at data, I always try to make sure that I'm looking at subgroups as well. And so more often than not, you learn more about how you're doing when you look at your subgroup data. And so we were able to see that we had growth in almost all of our subgroups. So students who have special education services versus our English language learners, students who are Black, Hispanic, et cetera. The one area we did not have growth was our multiracial students in the area of math. And so we look forward to doing more to support that particular subgroup of students. We're also really proud of the fact that last summer, we did a week-long of professional learning for our staff. We provided an additional 2 days for new staff, whether they were new to teaching or new to the zone. And although it was voluntary, 76% of staff attended our week-long summer professional development prior to the start of the school year. We continued with some of our signature events from the prior year. So the Black History Month Showcase at the Morris, that just slipped me. And we did our first Hispanic Heritage Month showcase at the DeBartolo, courtesy of Notre Dame. We also did our West Side Refresh, which is a mental health fair on the West Side. We do it at Washington High School, and so we did it again this year and had even more community partners than we did in the prior year. So as we go into updates from this year, I do want to take some time to talk a little bit about the work that we're doing so that we're all on the same page. So I want to talk a little bit about how school turnaround really works. Next slide. So there are just some common myths out there that, one, there are lots of simple solutions as it relates to turning around historically struggling schools, that fundamental lasting change can happen very quickly, that it's kind of a overnight fix, that there's nothing to learn from failing schools, which is absolutely not the case, and that turnaround is the problem of individual schools, not the district or the state. And finally, that turnaround is impossible. And I think we've all at various points heard some of these myths. I do want to point to this quote here that says, as it relates to school turnaround, there is no single 100% solution to the problems facing or struggling schools. Instead, there are 100 individual 1% solutions. And so the way to eat an elephant is one bite at a time. And it's kind of the same thing for turning around historically challenging schools. This is compounded by the very complex system within we work. And so here is a visual, right? So we have theoretically our students, our families, and our communities at the middle of things, but we have to navigate what's happening locally, what's happening statewide, what's happening at the legislature, what's happening at the district, and certainly what's happening nationally as it relates to funding, et cetera. And so you have to navigate all of these things, which can often result in a very challenging and messy situation in trying to turn around schools. Certainly, I think based on what I've heard, even the way that the zone came into being, kind of being forced upon by the state, was in itself a very messy situation. And so to kind of turn around schools in a messy situation is in itself challenging. And then when you think about that kind of environment, the other kind of roadblocks that exist, certainly, public and political will. People certainly expect that the turnaround will happen quickly. And so if it's not happening quickly or it's not sustaining over time, you lose public will, you lose political will. The funding is always an issue. And so certainly right now, like all school systems across the country, we are navigating the loss of ESSER dollars, but we're also navigating the loss simultaneously of the school improvement grant, as well as a Pride grant, which the zone was previously awarded to help with school culture. And while there are many people who embark on this work, there is an insufficient number of people who are truly experts in turning around schools and doing it in a sustained way. I would certainly not call myself one of them, but we're all trying to figure this out together. And when you don't have a wide cadre of experts, then it means that sharing resources and best practices can sometimes become limited. Outside of that, right, I think we all have a sense of like, what's the destination, right? So we know where we are right now, which is the red dot on that map, and we're trying to get to that green dot. But how you get there is often the challenging situation, and trying to build consensus, not just about how you get there, but how are you tracking whether or not you're making progress to get there, are also difficult things. And so those are just some of the things you have to navigate when you're trying to turn around schools, especially in times of uncertainty. And certainly the thing that most states or authorizing agencies will look to is test scores to determine whether or not schools are quote unquote failing or not. But I think anyone who works in a school, whether they're an administrator or a teacher, et cetera, or if they're at the central office, they'll tell you that whether or not a school is quote unquote failing has a lot more to do with just test scores. And so when you have people that are showing up day in and day out, doing the best that they can on behalf of students and families, to boil down the entire work that they do to just test scores is an oversimplification of determining how schools are doing. Further, without kind of greater context, when we focus just on test scores, you run the risk of either too prematurely declaring victory, which certainly it was good to start with. This is our average growth on the I Learned last year, but by no means is that a victory, right? And so when you focus just on test scores, you do run the risk of that. And so as I've talked about before, you have to make sure that you're looking at the right types of data in order to assess where you're going, but then also help figure out how you can sustain that turnaround. Go ahead. Essentially, the work that we're trying to do in turning around schools is change management. And one of the things that we know nationally in a study from the Harvard Business Review, across all industries, 70% of change efforts fail, regardless of the industry or sector. And I believe that that's even more prevalent in public education. And so this is, in essence, the work that we are trying to do, change management, which can be very difficult when going back to the very first slide, this is the way we've always done it, is that if that's the prevalent mindset across various stakeholder groups. So in thinking about the work that we're doing in terms of change management, it requires intentionality, strategy. And so I want to take a quick opportunity to share with you something that we did this current school year that speaks to how we approach change management by introducing a lesson loop.
Under academic achievement. And so I was able to just introduce this idea of lesson loop. We kind of looked at it and said, let's give it a try. Part of my professional responsibility that I'm choosing to focus on is student engagement and relationship building. I'm intentionally using the lesson loop to give data to them. This is what you told me works. Your test scores show me that this works.
You look at stuff and say, okay, I can take that right away. Or that's something, unless I'm forced to do it, I'm probably not going to do it. So, and lesson loop was one of those. She showed me the data, she showed me the engagement scores, and she said that it was worth it. I was like, okay, let me do it. So there was a correlation between student engagement and results.
So lesson loop, which we are able to do courtesy of a $50,000 grant that the zone was awarded from Cambiar, is a platform that allows students to give feedback directly to teachers at the end of a class. So at the end of the class, students anonymously are able to say to the teacher, this direct instruction you provided today did not work, or this manipulative that you used helps me to understand the lesson better. And then teachers are able to utilize that feedback to adapt their instruction, right? So it's one thing when teachers are hearing from the administrators who pop in from time to time to observe and then give feedback about instruction. But it's another thing when you're hearing it directly from your student, who's ultimately the end user of the information that you're trying to provide to that student. And so certainly, if I had taken the approach of saying all teachers were going to be doing this, we might have gotten a lot more resistance. But by making it optional this year, identifying some early adopters who voluntarily adopted Lesson Loop, they then served as ambassadors to with their colleagues. And so the first teacher you saw was Ms. Bramley, was an early adopter at Navarre, and then shared it in a PLC with one of her coworkers, Mr. Smith, who also teaches the same content area, and then he adopted it as well. And so when you think about change management, I think any of us, whatever careers we're in, know that when you get an edict from down on high, that you are more likely to resist than when you're hearing about things from your peers. So again, being intentional about how we go about change management, and the administrators are not looking at the feedback that students are providing to the teachers. So it is non-evaluative, it's non-punitive. Teachers may or may not voluntarily sit down with their administrator and say, look, my students are saying my class lacks engagement. And then they can work together with their administrator to come up with strategies about that. But one of our goals, our priority areas rather, this year was around student self-efficacy. And so now we have students that are giving input on what instruction needs to look like, I think is a valuable thing. And so I just talked about this here. You start off with alignment in terms of identify the things that you're trying to change, capturing data as to why it is that you want to change it, and then progress monitoring that data as you go about that change, having systems of accountability, and then giving things time to germinate. Again, going back to what the myths in terms of turning around schools I talked about earlier, that we expect things to happen overnight. You need time for things to germinate. And so for the upcoming school year, it will, after a year of it being optional and teachers are hearing about it from their peers, it will be required for the upcoming school year. So as we think about some of the other new things that we did for the 23-24 school year, I wanted to make sure that you are also hearing from various stakeholders. So we have with us this evening some parents, some staff, and some students who will be talking about some of the things that we're going to go through as well. So we started, or where we left off last year again, was these 9 investment areas, and we were able to distill those down into these 5 priority areas that determined our zone improvement plans. All of our schools did a comprehensive need assessment to then determine their school improvement plans. And so those SIPs align to our zone-wide improvement plan. And these were the 5 priority areas. So we're going to talk about, I believe, 4 of the 5 priority areas. First one, promoting positive student behavior and wellness. So one of the new initiatives that we did this year, wanting to focus on expanding enrichment opportunities for students, we partnered with 5 Star Life for just our 6th graders at Navarre. And every Friday, they would go out to Navarre. They would go out to 5 Star Life Summit, and we worked with them to align math and science standards to make it an experiential learning program. And what we found was that over the 6 weeks of the program, every single Friday, there was an 11% increase in attendance. And so over those 6 Fridays, 6th grade attendance was 97% at Navarre, comparison to 7th and 8th grade, where attendance was in the 70s, high 70s, 80%. So again, through enrichment, engaging students and them really wanting to participate, we saw a significant increase there. It was also a great opportunity. All of our students who participated walked away being child CPR certified as well as a part of that experience. We also this spring launched what we call Weekend Wonders. So we identified students who were on the cusp or at grade level and presented them with this enrichment opportunity on Saturdays. The invitation went out to about 60 students. The first Saturday, we had about 80% of students show up on a Saturday for this program, and it was of no cost to them. So they showed up with their families, and that ended up being a great program, and we hope to continue that next year. And then through a grant from the St. Joseph County Health Department in the amount of about $108,000, we were able to expand Gentlemen and Scholars, which is a mentoring program for our young boys. And so that is in all of our schools now. As we think about moving forward, one of the things that I've been talking to the team about is transition. So how are we making sure that our students are transitioning from grade to grade well? So that requires vertical alignment, vertical planning, but the same is true from elementary school to middle school. It is a big transition to go from fifth grade, where you are at the top of the ladder, to now you're middle school and you're back to being the lowest on the totem pole. And so wanting to be intentional about preparing students for that middle school transition, we are doing a week-long retreat in partnership with 5-Star Life. So students will go off campus and will learn about middle school readiness skills. We'll also include some academics as well, but it's largely social emotional. When you are bringing together, and whether it's middle school to high school or elementary school to middle school, when you're bringing together students from 4 different school communities that each have their own culture and way of doing things, and then they're converging in one building. If you're not intentional about setting culture now, as we're no longer 4 separate schools, we're no longer just Wilson, Coquillard, Warren, and Harrison, we're now one unit, Navarre. If you're not intentional about that, the culture, especially during the first quarter, will be challenging. And so that is something that we are launching. We're building on for this year. We did it for the first time last year, but it wasn't as robust as what we are planning to do this year. So in preparation for that as well, and in building on where we started last year, we wanted to push down into the 5th grade so that the transition for our rising 6th graders would not just begin during the summer. So we started with the 5-Star Life curriculum with our current 5th graders. And so we have here one of our amazing 5th graders from Coquillard Elementary, who will talk to us about her experience with the 5-Star Life curriculum and her excitement for middle school in 2 months, 3 months.
Hello, my name is Aurora Bonilla. I'm from Coquillard Elementary, and I am proud to present the South Bend Empowerment Zone.
You can go ahead, Ms. Morris.
Okay, hi, I'm Ethan Morose. I'm Dean of Students at Coquillard, and I'm also here for emotional support. Sorry, I look a mess. I took 150 kids to the Warren Dunes today. So if I look like that's what I did, that's what I did. Aurora put herself together. She was there too, but she looks nice. I was at school and then came, so I do not look nice. Okay, so Aurora has some really good answers to these questions. So Aurora, in reference to, thinking about 5-Star Life, what did you like the most?
What I like the most is how encouraging the 5-star videos are. Like, they encourage some students who are nervous about middle school to be more brave and encouraged to go move on in middle school, because there's a whole new building, whole new teachers, friends, a whole new chapter.
Great. And what did you learn about yourself through the process?
I learned about myself and how some mistakes I was doing. Like in this one episode called Failure, I used to hate failure because in my opinion, it made me look like a loser. And yeah, I really hated losing in some competitions. Like, for example, in the Weekend Wonders. Well, I mean, we did win first place, but I'm not trying to brag. I'm not trying to brag. But yeah, besides the point, we did win first place, but I feel kind of bad for the other students that did not win, because, yeah, I mean, they deserve the win, because, I mean, they kind of did try their best. And yeah.
You had mentioned to me though that episode kind of helped you deal with failure, right? Like when we talked about it at school a little bit. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And how is it, just to explain that, I guess, so what they're doing in the classroom right now is it's broken down into episodes. So one of the gentlemen from 5 Star Life kind of made these videos. And so it's like introductory into what they would then be doing in person. Is it's with one of the same leaders, and he makes these videos, and every episode is about like a specific emotion or something you go through in like the 5th, 6th grade age. So that's what she when she referenced like the failure video. And so how has it changed how you feel at school?
I feel a little bit more encouraged than I used to be before, because I used to feel like there's this something called the invisible audience, where the invisible audience is where something like people around you, behind you, in front of you, everywhere around you, you feel like people are judging you by your looks, how you act, what you wear, all of that kind of stuff. Yeah, it feels like I just like threw it in the garbage can. Yeah, like I feel more encouraged to be in more situations like what I am in right now. Like, yeah.
How do you feel about middle school next year?
I feel more encouraged because, yeah, like I said, a whole new building, more teachers, more friends. You might encounter some bullies, but yeah, you will eventually have to stand up to them eventually, because you can't just leave yourself into like a whole mess, like letting yourself getting down from those bullies. Yeah,
Yeah, that's
really.
good. You mentioned that at school too, right? Like feeling like it kind of touched on some things that you were nervous about, and then it, at least I think kind of like acknowledged them. Did you feel like that? We talked about that a little bit at school too. Like it made you think about them, talk about them, like, oh, other people are worried about this too. Like, you're in this together. That's good. That's good. Do you want to say anything else, Aura?
Mm, I think so, yeah.
You're good.
Mm-hmm. Another thing I feel about middle school is more, there's like, there could be more homework, more harder work, but yeah, well, yeah.
There will be. You're gonna do great.
Yes, obviously there was. But yeah, like some students, they like to work hard and achieve into their new chapters. Like, some students at Quilquiller, they don't really take things seriously. Like, yeah, we're struggling to do graduation because some students aren't just taking this seriously.
Yeah, and I feel like, do you feel like that something that I personally like, so as dean of students, I kind of like, I'm just making sure that all the kids are doing the videos and they're engaging, doing the discussion afterwards and stuff. And I feel like something we talked about at school last week when we talked about this was I think part of what's good about these videos is that it's like an intentional way to start the conversation. So it gets you talking with some of your classmates that you feel like are really motivated, and some that maybe aren't as motivated, but like everyone's kind of in dialogue about these things that are coming forward. And it's at least, I think, kind of like, bringing you together in that. You feel like that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. And we do want to acknowledge Aurora's mom, who has made sure she got here this evening, and her family. So thank you for being here. And you did a great job speaking in front of the trustees. So good job. And so, when we think about the transitions, as I mentioned, wanting to get out ahead of that, when I got here to South Bend, something that was a glaring oversight to me for middle school students is that we weren't necessarily preparing them for high school. And so in just other places I've worked, I've really tried hard to make sure that our middle school students were leaving middle school with as many high school credits as possible, which hopefully then sets them up in high school to be able to do dual enrollment, which then means less time in college, less student loans, etc. And so we introduced some high school credit courses at Navarre. we got pushback and people thought that our students didn't have the capacity to do it, but they do, and they have been doing it. And so at the end of this school year, 81% of our eighth graders will leave Navarre with at least one high school credit. We've also gone down to our seventh grade students as well. So this year we had 19 seventh grade students enroll in high school credit bearing classes, and 11 are currently on track towards getting those credits. And so we offer high school credits in a number of places: algebra, biology, preparing for college and careers, agriculture, food and natural science, public safety, and Spanish. Prior to his departure last year, again, in thinking about the facilities master plan and wanting to have seamlessness and vertical alignment, Dr. White and I talked about the fact that the majority of our students will most likely go to Washington. It's literally a hop, skip, and jump away. And at Washington, their key feature is their STEM program, right? So wouldn't it make sense that our eighth graders are leaving potentially with a biology credit to help set them up for when they go to Washington? So again, not just thinking about the 5 schools in the zone, but just thinking more systematically or systemically about vertical alignment. So this is some work that we're proud of. And so we're going to play a quick video to talk a little bit more about our high school readiness. So we'll just skip that video. Oh, there we go. Sorry.
Have students who are great at math, let's give you higher level math so that it pushes you. And of course, I'm going to be there helping you out, but I'm treating you guys like high schools.
And our turnaround process, especially when Principal Harris came on, he looked around and he said, we have the basic core curriculum, but what enrichment are we offering our students? What opportunities are we telling them that we see in their future?
I had a student, he didn't want to be in biology, and I said to him, no, you need to be challenged. What do you want to do with your life? At the end of it all, he looked at me and he went, I'm thinking about going to college.
They were heavily invested in these kids' success, and the kids really recognize that. That gives these students like a little bit of a head start, right? So they have some traction already heading into high school. The school is really preparing for that next step of learning. I've been in a lot of classrooms over my professional career. I did those classrooms that I saw in Navarre up against any of those. I was really impressed with what I saw.
And so we did have one of our eighth graders who was going to be with us tonight. Unfortunately, she was not able to make it. She's a student who is leaving Navarre at the end of the week with several high school credits. And so we wanted you to hear from her directly just about her experience in accumulating high school credits as she leaves for high school next year. So one of the other priority areas was around equipping and empowering our leaders and staff. And so one place we wanted to start was, requiring our staff to really commit to the profession. So last year, this time, when I made this presentation, one piece of feedback we got from Trustee McCullough, for example, was that we did not have enough staff or teachers that held certification. And we heard the same thing from the union, who felt that it was in many ways not fair that they had gone through the process of becoming fully certified and that so many teachers were not certified, getting the same level of compensation, et cetera, et cetera. And so in the fall, we sent a memo to all staff telling them that moving forward, we would no longer be hiring folks who did not have the requisite certification, and that anyone not in that process would be non-renewed. So we did non-renew all of our folks that did not have certification. That includes administrators. They have the opportunity to reapply, but we wanted to make sure that folks are holding the requisite certification. So we go to the next slide. We didn't want to just put that out there. We also wanted to support our staff in that process. And so we've been super intentional. So overall, we've seen since August to May, a 10% increase in the number of certified teachers in the zone. We have supported various folks with various credentialing programs. And so that's been to the benefit. And so as you can see here, in terms of staff at the beginning of the school year who were in various programs, whether it was a licensure program or a transition program, was just 7. When we get to May, we have over 90 folks here who are in various programs demonstrating their commitment to the profession. So we are thankful to our Executive Director of Talent Development, who's really worked hard on this area, who was a new role we created last year to help us spearhead that, Mrs. Melanie Hackett, in doing that. We also introduced our apprentice teacher program. And so I think the last time I was here was when we talked about approving that job description, which I think the corporation is using for its similar program as well. But I want to talk a little bit about that apprentice teacher program. So we're just going to skip the video. So we do have 2 of our apprentice teachers here that I'd love for you to hear from their experience. So we have Mr. Donovan Evans and Miss Gail Kirkland. Mr. Evans was previously a fax at Wilson, and he is now a Spanish teacher. And Miss Kirkland, who has been here in the corporation and zone for 38 years in various capacities, most recently as a para, but now is an intervention teacher working towards a degree and certification. So I'll turn it over to them to share their experience in the teacher apprentice program.
Hello, everyone. I'm Gail Kirkland. I'm at Navarre. I'm intervention / 7th grade math teacher. And I'm loving it. And I like the schooling because it's online. And I like that because you can work around your school hours and still get your work done. And right now I'm at a 4.0. I passed 4 classes. So when the opportunity came along to become a teacher and that I didn't have to pay for it, it's like, well, okay, I'll try it. So here I am.
Good evening. My name is Donovan Evans. I am a Spanish teacher at Wilson Elementary. When I heard about the programs through my principal, she, Samantha Smith, she approached me and she said, "This is what's happening. I think you need to do it." And ever since then, I've been very involved and I've loved it. It's actually kind of a dream that I wrote out in a notebook. And I came back to it because I wasn't going to do it. I just wanted to stay, continue to be the facts and, not be in the classroom hands-on. But I came across the notebook and the program is exactly what I wrote out. That was maybe 8 years ago. So I just felt like, okay, this is godsend. So, you can get it done and you're still teaching in the classroom. So I enjoy it. I enjoy being the 2%. The Black male and not just teaching anything but teaching Spanish, and my students love it. The teachers love it. So everyone is actually learning and are building together. So it's been very beneficial this past school year. The classes are easy, like Ms. Kirkland said, they're online. You can get it done. And we, others that are in the program, we all work together too to help each other out and hold each other accountable.
Thank you. And so, when we thought about the program, what better place to start than folks who are currently with us? So you think about someone like Ms. Kirkland, who has dedicated her entire life to the students of South Bend, giving her an opportunity to take that to the next level. And so I know often it is very easy to look outside the community and bring people in in terms of new hires, but there's plenty of talent already here in our community. We just have to give them the opportunity and provide them with the support and resources to set them up for success. So next, I want to talk a little bit about how we have gone about engaging our families. So I am a big believer that the parent is the first teacher and the home is the first classroom. And so one of the things that we've really wanted to do this year was to engage our families as equal partners and co-educators in their children's educational journey. And so we have one of our amazing parents here, Dr. Allen, who's a parent of a 7th grade student at Navarre. So I'll turn over to her to talk a little bit about her parent experience.
Thank you and good evening. I'm glad to be here with you all this evening. Yes, my name is Dr. Brianna Allen, and I have 4 children actually, who is within the school system, one who is with the empowerment zone, and the other 3 who are in South Bend Community Schools. In addition to that, I'm a very busy parent, very busy, not only with my children, but in my professional life as well. And so I was approached to participate and be a part of the Parent Advisory Council with Navarre, the South Bend Empowerment School zone. And at first I'm like, where am I going to find the time, right? Where can I find the time to be able to do this? But because education is extremely important, and I believe that families and parents being involved in the educational experience and journey of kids sets them up for success. And so regardless of my busy life, it was important for me to be involved. And so when I enter into Navarre, I'm familiar with the faces of the administrators. I'm familiar with teachers, coaches, and the like, and they are familiar with me. And whenever there are questions or situations that particularly come up with my child, we have that opportunity to have open dialogue for us to understand what's going on and what's being done at the school and what are efforts that I could do as a parent to help ensure that my child is being successful. So being involved in that is extremely important for parents, because that collaboration is how I look at it, really is essential. We as parents should know what's happening in the school. We should know and be connected with those people who are supporting our kids. And so the only way for that to happen is for us to be involved and to show up. And so I definitely do that. And I do encourage other parents to do that alongside with me. So thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to share your parent experience as a Navarre parent. So as we move towards the close of this presentation, quickly share some preliminary data for the 23-24 school year. So at a high level, I do want to note that the testing window for most, if not all of these assessments are still open as of the time that we pulled the data, which was on the 24th. So the WEED assessment, zone-wide proficiency, exceeded that of the corporation's high-need schools. The WEED assessment is an assessment to test language proficiency for English language learners. DIBELS, which is a literacy-based assessment from beginning of year BOI, end of year EOI. Zone-wide average progress at or above exceeded that of the corporation's high-need schools. Where there was some negative growth. Each zone school made progress in the percentage of students moving from well below, and students moving at or above on IREAD 3, which, as you might be aware, there is a first testing right around the spring break time, and then there's second testing happening right now, which is considered summer. Zone-wide average pass rate increased from the 21-22 school year to the 23-24 school year. 3 out of 4 zone elementary school increased pass rates from last year as well. And then the iReady assessment, again, beginning of year to end of year, in reading zone average, decrease in students 2 or more grade levels below exceeded that of the corporation and was comparable to that of the high need schools. And on math, we saw similar decreases in students 2 or more grade levels below, comparable to both all schools as well as the high need school. So I'll quickly go through that data. So here is the WIDA assessment. So again, this is the language proficiency for English language learners. And you can see each individual zone school, the zone average, as well as the corporation's average and the average of the high need schools in the corporation. And then this is how we've been performing on the WIDA assessment over the last 3 years. So as you can see, from 2022 to 2024, all of our schools, with the exception of one, had growth. But all of our schools grew from last year to this year, if I'm not mistaken there. And again, that's WIDA. So DIBELS, we go into DIBELS. So movement of students well below or below benchmark. So you can see that we decreased the number of students that were well below or below benchmark at the beginning of the year, with an average decrease of 6% zone wide. And then you can see the corporation's movement as well as the high need schools within the corporation. And then similarly, moving students at or above. So we increased zone wide by 6%, the students at or above benchmark. And then you can see there the corporations as well as the corporation high needs. Again, I do want to remind everyone that the testing window is still open, so there's still more students testing, and that should be wrapping up this week. iRead 3, as you can see here, on average, in terms of the pass rate in the zone, and you can see all of the corporation. So again, we are increasing the number of students that are passing from prior years. Certainly not where we want to be, but we are making progress. And then for each year, one of the things we look at is percentage of students passing on the first sitting of the assessment versus the summer retake. And so as you can see, each time we have an increase of students who from the first sitting in the spring to the second sitting in the summer. And so we are optimistic that the same will be true for this year as well. iReady, as you can see here, in terms of decreasing the number of students who are below grade level. So overall, we cut that by 15% zone wide. And again, you can see there the entire corporation as well as high need schools within the corporation. And this is reading. And then moving students at or above grade level, double-digit gains in terms of the percentage of students that were moving at or above grade level on reading. So at the beginning of the year, that was just 6%. And we've moved that to 25%. Again, not where we want to be, but we are making the necessary gains. And then on math, similarly, we cut by 19% the number of students who are 2 grade levels or below in math. And then in terms of moving students on grade level, we increased that by 16% on math. So we are both simultaneously reducing the number of students who are below grade level and simultaneously moving more students on grade level, which is essentially the work of turnaround. And going back to where we started in terms of our average growth, certainly we don't have the same number of students that are proficient, but our task is to grow students, and that's what we're doing. So we're reducing students below grade level, and we're growing the number of students that are on grade level, and that's essentially the work of turnaround. Certainly, I would love to have the luxury of saying, you know, I have 60% of students that are proficient. We're not there yet, but we certainly hope that if we continue to make these gains year over year, that we will get there eventually. As we come towards a close here, just wanted to share a couple of other things that we are thinking about for the upcoming school year. So this year we piloted a balanced scorecard. I think you guys have heard me talk a lot about data. So we created a balanced scorecard that has about 71 key performance indicators that we look at across various areas in the zone to progress monitor how we're doing. Certainly with the loss of ESSER and Pride and SIG, we will have to sustain these gains with even fewer resources. And we will hope to build on some of the initiatives we started this year. So at the building level, at the zone-wide level, we use our balanced scorecard to see how we're doing data-wide. But at the building level, we have an early warning system of various data points so that we can track which students are potentially at risk of not moving to the next grade. We've introduced a number of teacher wellness initiatives. So we have an app where teachers can get mental health services, and we're looking to expand on that. And then, of course, we have increased by 10% the number of teachers that are certified. We're gonna skip the video. So that is the report for the Empowerment Zone for the 23-24 school year, and I look forward to any questions or comments.
Thank you, Dr. Lewis. Really appreciate it. Thank you. Someone like to begin the questions? No questions. Mr. Castillo.
Good evening, Dr. Lewis. Thank you. That was a great bit of information that you gave to the board here tonight, and I welcome it. It sounds very positive. Very interested in that high school program that you started. That has possibilities, not only in your school, maybe in others. Of course, we've had a chance to talk before outside the board meetings, and I've always, unfortunately this year, maybe fortunately for you, but unfortunately for me, I was not able to get find an appointment to sit down and talk to you. But I have always found you to be a very upfront and very honest person. So I do have some questions, though, that's come to me, and that is about your budget. There's rumors out there that the budget, the expenses are over what the budget was expected. I didn't know you have a comment about that. Is that a rumor or is that a fact? Or if it's a fact, why?
Yeah, sure. Thank you for the question, Trustee Costello. So yes, so certainly like all districts or school systems nationally right now, we are all grappling with the loss of ESSER dollars. The zone, in addition to the loss of ESSER dollars, we're losing our SIG grant, which is a state grant, as well as our Pride grant. So we're losing all of those dollars simultaneously. That's roughly about a $7.5 million difference from our budget this year.
Okay.
At this time, we have presented a balanced budget to our board, but that budget is contingent on a number of different things. So that in that budget, we plan to potentially eliminate pre-K programming, which we offer at 4 schools, but maybe we can save it at 1 school. We have cut maybe about 25 positions, some at our central office level, some at the building level. We have canceled various contractors. We've eliminated various programs. For reference, our budget is going from approximately $32.5 million to about $25.2 million, right, with the loss of those funds. That being said, in order for us to operate as we would like to next year, that would require some partnership with the district in a number of areas, including transportation. So the corporation's transportation team is interested in serving us next year. We're interested in that as well. That would save us about $1 million returning transportation to the district as opposed to our current vendor. So that would certainly help us make our budget work. But we're making the necessary tough decisions as
Right.
everyone else is. So we've
Sure.
cut programs, we've cut staff, and at this point in time, we're prepared to make additional cuts if we need to in order to make the budget work.
Well, and I appreciate all those remarks because it's been very easy for you to come in here and say, oh, no, that's not a problem. That's not an issue. But you're not that way, and you address the issue. And as far as I'm concerned, if you're working on it, I know it'll get done. So I also want to bring up a question about the student code of conduct that you have in the empowerment zone. It's from you. I think unless it's changed, because I saw a memo you sent out to all the parents and you specified certain rules and regulations you wanted all the students to abide by. This is before I got on the board. I was impressed with it. And then my question to you, is it working? Have you changed any? Or I imagine what you saw at the beginning is not what you have right now, but are you satisfied with your student code of conduct?
So that's a tricky question. In general, I'm very rarely ever satisfied with anything.
Okay,
We have seen improvements.
that's a good answer right there.
We've certainly seen improvements based on the feedback that we hear from our teachers. Again, from last year to this year, we cut teacher attrition by 16%.
Oh.
So we were able to hold on to more teachers and the most teachers in terms of retention than we've had, at least in my understanding, since the zone has been around. So teachers feel more comfortable at work. Some of that has certainly do with the culture. And in order for the culture of the building to work, you need to have effective, well-articulated expectations for everyone. And so I do think as we think about any conversations around code of conduct, it's less about discipline and being punitive and more about these are the things that we believe as a community.
Sure.
These are the expectations, and this is how we're going to hold ourselves and each other accountable to meeting those expectations. We did that last year. Prior to his departure, Dr. White and I did a crosswalk in starting to, again, think more broadly and did a crosswalk between the current corporations and ours and saw where we could potentially make some changes. That work is happening this year. Dr. Green is on that committee, various members of the NEA, and I think I was just with the committee 2 Thursdays ago. And so we look forward to the new code of conduct that will be a zone and corporation code of conduct that we will all use together.
Well, that was my real question I was
Sure.
getting at, making sure that you had input into what we're doing as a corporation with the student code of conduct. I think that's very, very important. Also, just being with the experience of some of the things that you've had, sharing that with other people in our corporation-wide, I think would be very beneficial to everyone. So that's what basically I was trying to get at there. So you're aware that whatever we have as a student code of conduct that we come up with, you'll be implementing that in the empowerment zone as well.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Costello.
I do have a question. So what programs did you say you cut? Did you say early childhood education program?
So as of right now, we have pre-K in 4 buildings. We cut those 4 programs. We got some feedback. Right now, we put 1 back into the budget. But certainly, if the board says keep 4 and cut other things, I'll have to keep the 4 and cut other things. So That's one of the programs that we've cut right now. We've cut some of our tutoring programs as well. We've scaled back on field trips and things of that nature. So there's been a variety of different things.
But pre-K is something that we really needed to have. That's
Agreed.
something we should not have cut. So that's just one, that's my opinion. Another thing too, you also said, I wanted to ask, how is the apprentice teachers? How are they, is that through a grant?
No, it is not through a grant. And so you certainly heard from two of them this afternoon. So what we did for the apprentice teacher program was we had existing vacancies. Say, for example, to fill that vacancy with a brand new teacher, it's going to cost you $45,000. What we did was to say, take that $45,000 that comes with that one FTE to fund that teacher role, pay the apprentice teacher $35,000 to take that vacancy, and then pay Indiana Wesleyan University, which is our partner in the program, I believe about $7,500 for them to provide the degree and the certification to that apprentice teacher. And then we provide about a $2,000 stipend to a mentor teacher who mentors the apprentice teacher. So in essence, the $45,000 that we would have paid for a brand new teacher to fill that vacancy, we're filling it internally using the same funds. So in some ways, in many ways, it is budget neutral, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question?
I get it.
Okay.
Thank you.
You're
Another question. Another question. So did I also hear you say something about your busing?
Yes, ma'am.
So explain that to me, please.
Yes. So prior to my arrival, the prior zone chief took the zone schools out of the corporation's transportation services and outsourced that to a third party for student. In general, we are satisfied with their service, but that service comes at a cost that supersedes what we believe would be the cost if we use the corporation's transportation. The corporation has taken a look at our routes or number of students, et cetera, and has presented at least the transportation team, so I certainly don't want to speak for the entire corporation, has given us a preliminary cost of what it would cost us if we were to leave First Student and come back to the corporation, and it would potentially save us $1 million. So that is a budgetary decision that we're looking to make, given the loss of ESSER and SEGA and Pride. Does that answer your question?
It does answer my question because I remember, if I can remember correctly, we got First Student because the person before you wanted a bail schedule changed.
Mhm.
And so that's why we ended up with the First Students, because the bail schedule changing. So I certainly agree with that. Thank you. I just was curious.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. McCullough. Mr. Nella?
Sure. I wasn't volunteering yet, but thank you for your presentation. Mr. Costello covered some of the ground I was going to ask about the ESSER funds and the finance piece. I was kind of looking at your old board minutes and financials and things like that. So this school year, your enrollments decreased, what, about 13%, 200 and some students, 260 or something?
Our current enrollment, I believe, is 1,807. So that sounds about right. I need to get back to you with an exact number.
That's fine. I'm not trying to put you on the spot for the exact number. And so that's what, budgetary wise, $1.5 million also that
Potentially, yeah.
you see heads, dollars go with those heads. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
So then the other question I had is, knowing the MOU expires with the school corp in 2 years, how does that affect your planning, for next school year, and then potentially the next school year is the end, or potentially maybe not, depending on what the boards in the future do, but just kind of give some background on what do you envision for the next couple of years and how it plays out?
Yeah, certainly. So, enrollment decline is a national thing. And certainly Indiana and the South Bend community is not immune from that. So as our enrollment decline, the same is happening in the corporation and neighboring places as well. We last at the beginning of this school year, we saw just 4 new charter schools. And we anticipate that more will pop up as well. So that's something that we have to plan in mind. So the way you think about staffing is, do you have sufficient staffing for the number of students that you need? And so as student enrollment declines, your staffing and your spending needs to reflect that. Now, some things are fixed cost, right? So like whether you have 5 kids in a classroom or 25 kids in a classroom, the cost to heat that class is going to be the same. The cost to have lights on in that class is going to be the same. But personnel, how much you spend on various programs, those things will change. As far as I'm concerned, I am planning with an end in mind that this ends on June 30th, 2026. And so until someone tells me otherwise, that's how I'm working. So fortunately or unfortunately, I've also been intentional about, well, we're not adopting new curriculum or new programs because whoever has to make the decisions on July 1, 2026, once the schools return to the corporation, we wouldn't want to adopt something that we've only been doing for 12 months and then do we exit or do we not? Which is why when we think about transportation, for example, starting to potentially roll the zone schools back into the corporation transportation now, in my opinion, makes financial sense given the loss of ESSER and SIG and Pride. But this is something that, in my opinion, would inevitably happen anyway. Certainly, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know what would happen on July 1 if we keep a subset of schools on different transportation systems. But again, that is something that I would anticipate and hope for sake of unity, as we are, in my opinion, one system, would be what we would do. So I'm thinking about the end in mind. And so where we can begin to roll things back into the corporation, I'm all for that. The same is true for other resources such as personnel as well. So, as I've mentioned before, we're all grappling with the loss of ESSER dollars and various grants. And so if there are ways that we can share personnel in various areas and do some cost savings there, by all means, let's do this. This, in my opinion, as of right now, is coming to a close one way or another. So until somebody tells me otherwise, I'm beginning that process, right? So it took us a year to think about how we would close Warren. It's been on my mind how we bring this to a close. And this is, you can't just flip the switch and end the zone. So starting to roll things in, especially as it relates to resources and inflation and difficult financial situations, I think it's in all parties' best interest to where we can partner to absolutely partner and share resources.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I have a quick comment too. Another quick comment. It's not so much as a question as a comment. So as we think about the enrollment, you mentioned that enrollment, that triggered something in my mind, where we have to be conscious about the enrollment, how many students are in the classroom. And so when you eliminated the pre-K, that makes your enrollment go down in your schools. And so, am I right or no? Because
Well,
you had a curious look on your face.
Well, I never want to correct you, Ms. McCullough, but enrollment in pre-K, we don't get funding for in the way that we do for K through 8. So pre-K, we have to apply for a voucher and then get reimbursed by the state, but that depends on whether or not students are eligible, right? And so,
But are they not included in your count when you?
yeah, they are, they,
That's my point. No?
no, for funding purposes, no, but overall
Overall
numbers,
count.
yes,
That's
yes,
my-
yes.
that's my
yeah,
point.
Okay.
So I'm looking, so if the state is looking at how many kids is in your school, right?
I don't believe they count pre-K, but I can ask that question and get back to you for sure.
Okay, please.
They don't, yeah, I don't believe they
Count
do.
pre-K?
No.
Okay, so how are you going to increase your enrollment because I don't think that each one of those schools in the zone, are they at capacity?
Oh, that depends on who you ask. If you're asking classroom teachers, yes. So, when I got here, something that I was proud of was that we have smaller class sizes. So, or
I-
K
I'm proud
through
of that
two.
too, Okay.
Thank you. Or K through two was 20, and or 3 through 8 was 24, but we've had to increase that to 22 and 26 respectively. I certainly don't want to ever have classroom sizes that are 30 or anything like that, right? And that's one of the things that's helped us with or teacher retention as well. They enjoy having smaller classroom sizes. But again, when you look at the trajectory of enrollment, as a system, we were previously the collective We South Bend, the fourth largest corporation in the state, and I think that's now 8th or 9th. So there's an enrollment decline
Right.
that we're all dealing with. So, kids aren't necessarily just leaving zone schools. We have 2 charter schools that are literally in our backyard. They recruit very hard. They take the kids over the summer. They get the funding for the kids. And then after count day, they send the kids back to us. And so we then keep them, but we don't get the funding for them. But we will do what we can to try to recruit students. I certainly want to recognize the superintendent who's been very intentional about outreach to families. And I know the corporation sent out postcards trying to welcome families back. And I see the bulletin boards around the city. So there is an active campaign underway in trying to engage and re-invite families back to us. But ultimately, we all have to just have a competitive, if not a better product for them to come back to us. And we also just have to deal with decline in birth rates, and people are waiting longer to have kids because the economy isn't what it used to be.
Absolutely.
So-
What I'd like to see is us recruit our kids back from those charter schools back into our corporation. And so we do that with educational excellence. So I get that.
Yes, ma'am.
You have one thing. You mentioned the students that come back. I'm always curious about student mobility rates in buildings. Do you know what like the mobility rates are in your different schools? And this is like completely like, I know you'd have to dig in on this, but I'm always curious about how the mobility rates impact the test scores. Because also the test scores aren't always reflective of the same group of kids year over year, which is why I have a real issue with tests like this, how these scores work anyway. But are you seeing that correlation in the zone?
Certainly. So I'm glad you mentioned that. And so hopefully, as I talked about in the presentation, why test scores is not necessarily the sole or the right indicator to look at turnaround to the points that you just raised. Yes, it has an impact because, as you do know, in order for students to sit the test, they need to have a minimum number of days in school, right? So you're not going to have a student sit the iLearn if they've only been in school for 90 days. It's that's injustice to the students. B, the state isn't going to count the data, right? So if you have a lot of mobility, that's problematic in terms of like the hard numbers. This had to be the question that you had to ask, right? I don't have that data point off the top of my head, but I'm happy to get back to you with that. But there is an impact.
Yeah, I dream of a day when every building's test score has the mobility rate right next to it. So people understand that the kids being tested didn't necessarily get their whole education in that building.
Right.
So it's a moving target, and it's more about the individual child than what it looks like in mass in one building.
Earlier, I talked about not having turnaround experts. I think you are one. You understand some of
I always have an opinion.
the mechanics of it.
The other question is, on the vouchers for pre-K, I just think it's good for people to understand like those limitations. So how are you getting the state funding, and which students can you not get funding for?
So I don't want to speak out of turn here because I know the state just recently revised some of those criteria in terms of who's eligible and what the reimbursement amounts are. Fortunately, we do have an expert on our board, soon to be Dr. Heisten, who's seated behind me. And so, believe me when I say that any decisions around pre-K will not be easy. And so she has been working diligently with us to make sure that we're looking at all options that, so again, we went from last Tuesday at the board meeting, me presenting a budget that did not include any pre-K at all, to right now, we do have one of our schools back having pre-K, and I'm sure she will continue to work with us to potentially bring it all back. So we will see, but yeah, pre-K is not something where we just send our enrollment to the state and they just send us money back. Parents have to qualify based on eligibility, which is income related, et cetera. They then have to fill out forms in order to then get approved for the voucher. And then we have to do the submitting of that. Again, that process, as I understand it, will be a little bit easier moving forward. And so that could, because it will be easier moving forward, could create an opportunity for us to potentially revisit that. But for context, this was the first year we started submitting for reimbursements for vouchers. So the first 2 years the zone ran pre-K, we did it completely at no cost to families. And so we ran it 100% in the red. But there are various mitigating factors to that, including you need to pass certain state requirements as a pre-K provider in order to be eligible to get reimbursed. So you need to be classified as like a level 3, et cetera, et cetera. Right? I'm saying it right. Level 4, right? So there are just certain things you need to do as a site. We started out being half day. We need to expand to a full day. Also, when you're a half day, then you're running transportation another time, right? So that's another cost as well. So even if we do pre-K again next year, and again, that's the hope, because to Ms. McCullough's point, early childhood education is important for literacy, right? And I know that, I swear by that, but you have multiple competing priorities and limited resources. But even if we do have it next year, the plan is to not offer transportation as well as another way to bring costs down. So we're looking at multiple scenarios. And I welcome any other suggestions as well.
I will do the best I can to think. I would love to have some suggestions on that, but I have a lot of suggestions for the state on that, like fully fund pre-K and maybe not vouchers. That's just my
That would
suggestion.
make the most sense.
Because we
well,
want third grade reading scores to improve. Pre-K might be.
Well, let me know when you decide to run for office and I will make a
I'm in one right now.
donation. Okay. But
Thank you for
again,
that.
if you have any other feedback, I welcome that. I hopefully, as you guys would have seen, I do hear the feedback from the trustees and respond to that. So again, I think I've pointed to several things this evening was the direct result of feedback that you all provided to me last year.
Thank you.
It's okay, Dr. Green, one quick, you hit on my favorite topic, demography. It's like, I think it might be my favorite word too, but you talked about smaller family size, and the birth rate in the United States is the lowest it's ever been. And I have a spreadsheet that shows the enrollment of all the high schools in the area going back 20 years. And if you look, South Bend high schools total have shrunk 15% in the last decade. But then if you look at the all non-SBCSC area high schools, it's grown less than 2%. So the number of high school age students is going down. Yes, we've lost a ton, but it's not like they're all showing up somewhere else. And the Catholic high schools have lost 2%, and Elkhart has lost almost close to 10%. So it is a national trend, and people have to be aware of it. It's kind of funny how we live in a state where they want to promote more and more schools, and I kind of laugh because I'm like, there's fewer children, but that's fine. You want to create a system of under-resourced schools. In 10 years, there'll be less private schools, there'll be less Catholic schools, there'll be less charter schools, and there'll be less public schools. It's just basic math.
So it's a perfect storm. You have decreasing birth rates, which mean declining enrollment. You have inflation and general rough economic times. You have more school choice and unrestricted school choice. So it's kind of boundaryless. And Indiana is the first place I've ever seen that. It's, school choice to the 10th degree here. You can live here and go somewhere that's like 5 districts over if you're willing to transport yourself there. So all of these things kind of converge, and you have this perfect storm. And so, not only do we need to have some hard conversations about the decisions we need to make given the situation, there's a larger conversation around how do we re-envision public education in our country, and what does that look like moving forward? Because even the students that you have it's hard to get them to school. Why do I need to come to school when I can learn how to code on my phone? And I can learn how to code and I can make more than everybody in this room as an 18-year-old. I don't need to come to school. So what is the value of education to our young people? These are the conversations we need to be having. And so that impacts funding, etc.
Others? I do. Um, I don't want to gloss over the point that a couple of people have made now in terms of priorities. We're talking about the necessity of preschool and reaching kids as early as possible. At a time when you have a state legislature that passes a retention law before it actually has provided the resources to support literacy. So we can't miss that point. So I'm going to go to more of a micro level than my colleagues. And I guess first, pick up on the question I asked you last year when you had 9 priorities. And now you have 6. How'd you get there?
Well, 5. We distilled it from 9 to 5.
My apologies.
How do we get there? Board feedback, feedback from staff, just some internal reflection in terms of the data we got back from the summer. At the time when we made that presentation with those 9 investment areas, we hadn't gotten our final iRead or iLearn results yet. So all of those things informed that. And then each building had to do a comprehensive needs assessment as well. We did a retreat with all of our principals for a week here locally, and we spent a lot of time digging into a variety of different data points to help us get to those 5 priority areas.
So my concern overall for our district and others as well is literacy. And is it significant that you don't name literacy as one of your top priorities?
I personally wouldn't read too much into that, right? I think it doesn't sit by itself in a vacuum, right? So, students improving in their math results, you can't improve math if you don't know how to read the question in order to do the computation to provide an answer, right? So literacy reading is foundational to everything else. So I personally wouldn't read too much into that. That's where we put most of our resources when you think about professional development, external vendors that we utilize, tutoring programs, etc. It's really been to support literacy even before the state was thinking about expanding literacy coaches. Yes, they have required K-2 coaches, but we made the decision internally to say we're also going to have grades 3 through 5 literacy coaches, which we don't get funding from, right? But it just, in my mind, it made sense. So that's a position that I created because of that focus on literacy. So, I'm happy to, for the upcoming year, as we think about our zone improvement plan, like have the word literacy there explicitly, but by no means are we not focused on literacy.
And by no means did I suggest you weren't focusing on literacy as much as just noticing, where you're not lifting it up. But given what you just said, I think it makes sense that it's embedded.
Right.
And it's embedded in engaging families, support ecosystems. You mentioned before a pretty neat program of letting kids give feedback on lessons. And that's part of this. I think you've invested a great deal in socio-emotional learning. I think many people's struggle is to connect the socio-emotional piece to the academic. You're saying they're absolutely integral. I think they are. But how did you begin to tease out? Because I think I heard you say earlier that it made a difference having that kind of response. Does it play out in in some abstract way? Is it making its way into instruction and learning in some sort of concrete way?
Sure. So you can't have teaching and learning unless you have the culture for it. So, whether that's expectations for students and staff via a code of conduct, or, making sure that students can self-regulate via social emotional skill building, etc. Teaching and learning cannot happen unless you have the conducive environment to it. You can throw all the money and resources you want and bring in all the fancy curriculum and vendors you want, but if the culture isn't there, all of that is for naught, at least in my opinion. And so I think there are things that are foundational, right? Having the right culture in your building, not just at the you need to have the right culture system wide, right? One that's built on trust. And so like staff can give, central office folks feedback and say, this PD was terrible and don't do this again. And we listen and we respond. So at the end of each Thursday, when we do PD, staff fill out survey. And one of the questions is, was this professional development relevant to my job? Second question is there something actionable from this PD that I can go back and do? And we look at that data. And so if only 60% of staff are saying the PD was relevant to their job, we missed the mark. If only 60% of staff are saying there wasn't anything actionable that they can go back and do in their classrooms tomorrow, then we wasted our time, right? So like that's something that's culture, like parents realizing that they need to pick up the phone when we call, they need to show up to orientation. All of these things are culture things, and you can't get to the meat and potato unless you have the right conducive culture for teaching and learning to happening. I would, certainly would have loved it if I was here in the beginning. We wouldn't be doing these things now, and we would be spending now really accelerating learning, in particular literacy. But we had to do those things first, get the foundational things right. Even when we look at staff attendance, last year we cut staff staff callouts by 12% in one quarter. I mean, when staff feel more comfortable coming to work, they feel safe, they feel respected, they feel supported, they're going to show up to work. No matter what industry you look at, a happy employee is a productive employee. So we focus on wellness. And so we redid all the teacher lounges, and they all have massage chairs, and we offer mental health support via an app. The staff can get access to therapy and things that they need. All of these things are part of the culture. And then when you get the culture stuff right, then we can get into real rigorous pedagogy. But to try to do that first in a chaotic environment, in my opinion, is counterproductive. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I will have one more follow-up.
Sure.
So I think that it's a more than a reasonable explanation for what I was asking. And I think we're in perfect agreement that there has to be a culture. There has to be a place where kids feel safe. They feel like they belong. And before any real learning is going to happen. But there's probably nothing that we can do sitting here right now, to respond to, Senator Rogers, who says, well, we should mandate retention without fully understanding exactly the dynamic you just described. And yet we're facing the zone, all of South Bend schools, facing 20% of our kids are at least 2 grades behind. What's the pragmatic way to approach this? We were cutting preschool, the state won't fund it. Holding us accountable to making sure that 3rd graders pass these tests. But they haven't, again, we don't necessarily have the resources to ensure that kids who are coming to school, perhaps without any preschool at all, probably not as quality preschool. So what are we doing? And I'm really interested in what you're doing. How do you get to that level?
Sure. So I think a couple of things. One, although it's probably not what we sign up for as educators, I do think a part of our work is advocacy. And so we have to engage the folks who are making decisions, many of whom have never been in a classroom, or they only show up to a school building when it's election seasons. They read a book to kindergartners and you don't see them again, right? But they're making all the decisions. So I do think a part of our work has to be around advocacy and policy. Now, many systems, districts will either have someone on the staff or someone that they hire as a consultant that is doing lobbying on their behalf. I think that's something that has to be a part of the priority. Next to that, I do think you also have to really focus on what's in your locus of control, right? Because otherwise you can get really distracted and then you lose sight of everything. And so then that brings me to my third point around like, how do you do this pragmatically? Partnerships and kind of collective sharing and pooling of resources. And I already feel like I'm kind of back at my dissertation defense here from all the questions and the comments. But one of the things that I talk about in that research, which is new and emerging research, the pathway forward for historically oppressed communities is this idea of collectivism, specifically for African Americans, Afrofuturism. And so again, when I'm saying, given that we will all be impacted by what's happening financially and societally, that we need to look at sharing resources and pooling resources and not working in isolation and putting up borders, et cetera. That's something that we have to do if we want to pragmatically move forward. Now, I don't know, I've said this before to Mr. Ray, president of the chamber, that I'm losing a teacher, for example, because he wants to go to Indy, where there's a better dating pool. I don't know. If I need to sit down and talk to families and say, I need you all to have more kids so we can have kindergarten enrollment, if that's something we need to do as a community, then, but again, right, like, that's not what we can do. And that's not, do we want to spend time doing that? It's like, what's within our locus of control, right? What we can do is find strategic partnerships where it is mutually beneficial, share and pool resources to the extent that it makes sense and it's mutually beneficial. That's how we're going to get through this current situation. But if we kind of do the whole rugged individualism and I'm going to do this on my own, we're kind of all going to fail, in my opinion. So that's my 2 cents, but sometimes I don't know most times I don't know what I'm talking about.
No, it's worth a lot. Well, thank you very much for coming to us and giving us an update. I think we were quite satisfied by the presentation and your answers to the questions. So we're very grateful, if I might speak for the board.
Thank you. I meant to do this earlier. I would be remiss. I need to thank and acknowledge the board of the Empowerment Zone, or board president, Mr. Samson Tejas, or vice president, Mr. Jeff Ray, or treasurer, Mr. Ryan Mathis, our board secretary, soon to be Dr. Rosa Heisand, and then we have Sonia Watkins, our designee of the superintendent, Karima Fowler, the designee of the board president, Miss Stephanie Ball, the District 4 representative, 3 representative, Miss Leslie Wesley, did I get it? And Mr. Dwayne Wilson. So our work would not be possible without our board of directors, who are all volunteers, just trying to do good for the community. And thank you all for the comments and the feedback. And again, if you have other comments and feedback, I certainly welcome that. Thank you.
I just have one more thing to say. You got to find a way to get that pre-K back in your schools.
Yes, ma'am.
That's all I want to say.
Yeah, next year when I'm back, I'll have a report on there will be pre-K.
Okay, we'll be looking for that.